Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Texas Abbott, backed by fellow U.S. Republican governors, remains defiant on border. Governor Lee visits Texas amid politicized immigration clash, offers to send more Guard support. GOP governors back at Texas border to keep pressure on Biden over migrant crossings. RBA set to hold rate at 12-year high as bank overhaul begins. Britain must stop funding those who wish to destroy our borders. Texas Abbott, backed by fellow U.S. Republican governors, remains defiant on border. Yahoo! Texas Governor Greg Abbott and several other Republican governors have vowed to defy the Biden administration and maintain state control of a U.S. border hotspot for as long as it takes. Abbott has deployed the Texas National Guard at Shelby Park in the border town of Eagle Pass, where he staged Sunday's news conference along with Republican governors from 13 other states. The Biden administration has maintained that border control falls strictly under federal jurisdiction. Immigration has become a potent political issue in the run-up to November 5 elections that will likely pit Biden against former President Donald Trump. Governor Lee visits Texas amid politicized immigration clash, offers to send more Guard support. Yahoo! Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has offered to send additional Tennessee National Guard to Texas amid an increasingly politicized clash between state and federal officials over border patrol issues. Lee joined Texas Governor Greg Abbott and a contingent of other Republican governors in Eagle Pass, a Texas border city that has emerged as a flashpoint over immigration issues. Lee on Sunday called it a crisis, and the state previously sent 125 National Guard members to the area in October. GOP governors back at Texas border to keep pressure on Biden over migrant crossings. Associated Press. A decline in border crossings is part of a complex mix of developments in play across the U.S. border, including heightened Mexican enforcement. The number of crossings in Eagle Pass has recently fallen to a few hundred a day. Mexico has bolstered immigration efforts that include adding more checkpoints and sending people from the northern border to southern Mexico. The country has also deported some Venezuelan migrants back home. RBA set to hold rate at 12-year high as bank overhaul begins. Bloomberg. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, is expected to hold interest rates at 4.35% at its first meeting of the year, according to economists. The RBA is likely to maintain a hawkish stance due to elevated inflation, despite it cooling. The central bank may push back against any bets on a near-term easing, following a cautious rate hike campaign and inflation levels above the 2 to 3% target. The RBA's cash rate is about 1 percentage point below the Fed's, even though Australian inflation is higher. Britain must stop funding those who wish to destroy our borders. Telegraph. The author argues that the case of Abdul Ezzadi, who committed a violent attack in the UK after gaining asylum on the grounds of religious persecution, highlights the weaknesses of the criminal justice system, immigration courts and human rights laws. The author also criticizes the complicity of charities and institutions in failing to uphold the law and protect the public. The author suggests that the denial of cultural clashes and the displacement of blame onto other factors is a common response from liberals, and calls for changes to human rights laws and an end to funding for organizations that oppose border controls. More than 15% of immigrants leave Canada within 20 years of arriving, StatCan report finds. The Toronto Star. More than 15% of immigrants in Canada leave the country within 20 years of admission, according to a report by Statistics Canada. The report also highlighted the difficulties some immigrants face in integrating into Canadian society. It found that the number of immigrants who left increased to 17.5% after 20 years, while more than 5% of immigrants admitted between 1982 and 2017 emigrated within 5 years of landing. The report also found that immigrants from Taiwan, the US, France, Hong Kong, and Lebanon were the most likely to emigrate within 20 years of admission. Police hunting Clapham suspect offer £20,000 reward. BBC. A reward of up to £20,000 is being offered for information leading to the arrest of the suspect in a chemical attack on a mother and her daughters in Clapham, police have said. Abdul Shokoor Ezzadi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Underground Station on January 31 at 21:33 Greenwich Mean Time, the Metropolitan Police said. The injured woman, known to Ezzadi, is critical but stable in hospital. The attack, carried out with a corrosive substance, took place on Lessar Avenue, Clapham at 1925 on Wednesday. How the AK-47 of Tehran changed warfare and set fire to the Middle East. Telegraph. Iran's Shahid drone has become a deadly weapon wreaking havoc across the Middle East and beyond. The drone was launched by an Iranian-backed militia group in Iraq and evaded U.S. air defenses before crashing into a barracks in Jordan, killing 3 U.S. soldiers and injuring 25. The Shahid drone has also been used by Houthi militia groups in Yemen against the Saudi-led coalition and by the Syrian regime. It is being exported to Russia for use in its invasion of Ukraine. The drone is particularly attractive to Russia because it is already battle-tested and easy to ship in large quantities. The RNLI is here to save people at sea, no matter who they are. Telegraph. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution, RNLI, is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. The charity, which relies on volunteer crews and donations, has provided at-sea rescue services around the UK and Irish coasts since 1824. However, the RNLI is currently facing challenges as it has become associated with the small boats crisis in the English Channel. The charity has been accused of aiding human traffickers by responding to distress calls from migrants attempting to cross the channel. It has also faced criticism from those who argue that the frequent callouts to rescue migrants are placing an unsustainable strain on local communities and the RNLI crews themselves. Despite the controversy, the RNLI maintains that its purpose is to save lives at sea, regardless of who is in distress. Gillian Keegan under fire after claiming Clapham attack case not really about asylum. Telegraph. UK Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has faced criticism for claiming that a chemical attack carried out by an Afghan refugee was not really about asylum. The refugee, Abdul Ezedi, arrived in the UK illegally in 2016 and was denied asylum twice but was later granted leave to remain after claiming to have converted to Christianity. Ezedi is suspected of carrying out an attack on a woman and her 2 children with a corrosive substance. Calls to tighten asylum laws have grown following the revelation that Ezedi had previously been convicted of sexual assault and exposure. Exclusive: Why New York State Police Say Orange County DA Undermined Megan McDonald Murder Case. Yahoo! A New York State Police report obtained by USA Today Network New York reveals that Orange County District Attorney David M. Hoovler deliberately tampered with a murder investigation, as well as raises questions about Orange County Judge Craig Stephen Brown. The report suggests that, due to a conflict of interest, Hoovler deliberately hindered the investigation into the murder of Megan McDonald, which has been unsolved for 20 years. Hoovler failed to recuse himself from the case when he became district attorney in 2013, despite having represented one of the suspects in 2008. The report also suggests that Hoovler deliberately botched the investigation and obstructed the case as a result. 2 senior officials working on the case concluded that they had to take extraordinary measures to bring the case to trial. Conservatism is popular when it solves problems. Telegraph. The Conservative Party in the UK needs to focus on achieving results rather than just making promises in order to regain the trust of voters, according to a commentary piece by Lee Anderson MP. He argues that the party needs to push through policies that align with Conservative principles and deliver tangible outcomes. Anderson suggests that the party faces obstacles in achieving its goals due to the current institutional and legal structure of the UK. He highlights issues such as illegal immigration and the post-pandemic economy as areas where the party should take decisive action. Anderson also calls for a grassroots movement of popular conservatism to reform bureaucratic structures and advance conservative policies. Unlocking the American Dream, Ohio immigrant homeownership growing, 35th in nation. Yahoo! Nearly 60% of foreign-born Ohio residents own their own homes, but the percentage of native-born homeowners in Ohio is around 70%. However, the data also shows that immigrant homeownership steadily increases with one's length of residence in the U.S. For immigrants living in the U.S. over 30 years, the homeownership rate in Ohio is over 80%. There are several factors that can impede or support homeownership for immigrants, including employment opportunities, wealth that immigrants acquire before immigrating, access to credit, a pathway to citizenship, housing discrimination, and other factors. A major barrier to homeownership for some immigrants is access to credit. Many new Americans lack a lengthy local credit history, and some are used to operating in economies where buying things on credit is frowned upon. For some immigrants, a lack of citizenship or permanent residency status can discourage foreign-born people from purchasing a home. Some immigrants may also face discrimination in the home buying process, which can take the form of not being shown as many units, or they're being steered to kind of a specific location by their realtor, which fosters segregation. Protesters take to Montreal streets to oppose Quebec housing bill. CBC. Protesters gathered in Montreal to oppose Quebec's Bill 31 and call for the resignation of the province's housing minister. The bill, if adopted, would allow landlords to reject lease transfer requests without specifying why, leading to lease cancellations. Demonstrators argue that the bill takes away tenant rights and supports real estate speculators. The government claims the bill aims to restore balance between tenants and owners and includes provisions to protect tenants, such as payments for evictions. The Regroupement de Commites Logement et Associations de Locataires du Québec, or CLALQ, also criticized politicians who linked immigration to the housing crisis, stating that data shows the shortage and rising rents are not due to immigration. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friendly neighborhood 6 doctor here, bringing you the latest news from around the world. Today, we have stories ranging from border control clashes in the US to the debate over immigration in the UK, as well as insights into homeownership for immigrants and housing protests in Canada. So, let's dive in. In the US, Texas Governor Greg Abbott and several other Republican governors are defying the Biden administration's authority on border control, vowing to maintain state control of border hotspots. This clash between state and federal officials has been fueled by the upcoming elections and the potent political issue of immigration. It's a battle of wills that will likely pit President Biden against former President Trump in November. Meanwhile, in the UK, the case of Abdul Ezzadi, an Afghan refugee who committed a violent attack after gaining asylum, has sparked a debate about the weaknesses of the criminal justice system, immigration courts, and human rights laws. The author of the article argues for changes to these laws and an end to funding for organizations that oppose border controls. The controversy surrounding asylum laws has also led to calls for tighter regulations and a re-evaluation of the process. In Canada, a report by Statistics Canada reveals that more than 15% of immigrants leave the country within 20 years of admission, citing difficulties in integrating into Canadian society. The report also highlights which immigrant groups are most likely to emigrate within 20 years. This data sheds light on the challenges faced by immigrants in their new home and the need for support and integration programs. Moving on to other news, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, RNLI, in the UK is celebrating its 200th anniversary, but it's currently facing challenges due to its involvement in the small boats crisis in the English Channel. The RNLI has been accused of aiding human traffickers by responding to distress calls from migrants attempting to cross the channel. Despite the controversy, the RNLI maintains that its purpose is to save lives at sea, regardless of who is in distress. Now, let's talk about homeownership for immigrants. In Ohio, nearly 60% of foreign-born residents own their own homes, and the rate increases to over 80% for immigrants living in the U.S. for over 30 years. However, there are barriers to homeownership for immigrants, including access to credit, lack of citizenship or permanent residency status, and discrimination in the home buying process. These factors highlight the challenges faced by immigrants in achieving the American dream. Lastly, in Canada, protesters have taken to the streets in Montreal to oppose Quebec's Bill 31, which would allow landlords to reject lease transfer requests without specifying why. Demonstrators argue that the bill takes away tenant rights and benefits real estate speculators. The government claims the bill aims to restore balance between tenants and owners, but critics argue that it does not address the underlying housing crisis. And there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour of the latest news stories. From border clashes to housing protests, these issues highlight the complexities of immigration and the challenges faced by immigrants and governments alike. Now, I turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on these topics? Do you have any questions or insights? Let's open the floor for discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.